love that. Yeah. I love getting philosophical with it. I mean, that's what batteries do, is they make you think. They make you think about the possibilities. And I love how you just leapt to interplanetary, intersolar system space travel. Yeah, let's go there. I mean, really, it's so interesting to me how batteries can open up these worlds of possibilities with a new chemistry, a new pack design, you know, a new size of the battery. There's so much. And that's another thing I really love about batteries is it has global implications, but you can get super hyper local with how you focus on solving problems. Anyway, but yes, data centers, AI, they need batteries.
Welcome to I Like Batteries, the show where we explore the world of batteries. I'm Mike Muldoon.
And I'm Jeff Lynch. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Jeff. How's it up in Maine? Are you getting a lot of snow up there, or is it pretty good?
Not tons. We got like 6 inches last week, and we got, 3 or 4 overnight. So it was pretty. It stays cold, so it was easy to swipe away. No snowblower necessary. We actually did the old-fashioned shovel.
Oh, you did? This is good. Yeah, no, it's actually been snowing all day, all morning, and into the evening as well. It's still snowing out there. And I will say, I mean, probably by the time this comes out, it's fair, but I did get a gift for my wife and for us, kind of as a family. I did up for the Ryobi 18-volt kind of little snow blower type of thing that we're able to do to kind of push shovel, I would say.
Oh, like a power shovel thing.
Like a power shovel. Yeah, I guess we call it and of course, a battery-powered shovel.
Well, of course. If it's Ryobi, it's going to be battery-powered, sure.
Yeah, it is. Of course, it's a good point. But even more important than that, Jeff, it's a great night because we have somebody that we're going to interview on the show, and I'm excited about this. I know you're excited about this. It's Jill Pestana. Jill is more than a battery scientist. She is a trailblazer in the battery industry with a passion for providing resources to support the energy storage industry. And this is excellent. So, Jill, welcome to the I Like Battery Show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about batteries with you guys. I like batteries very much, too.
This is good. You're on the right show then. That's excellent.
And I'm glad I'm in the right place.
Yeah, definitely. You have you've been doing some of this kind of, I wouldn't say podcasting, but you've been doing some of this YouTubing, I would say, for a little bit of time about this. And Across the Nanoverse, did I get that right? Is what your show is on YouTube? Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I started the channel in about 2018, 2019. I decided to record some videos about batteries because I was a battery scientist at the time and struggling to learn things like electrochemical impedance spectroscopy. And when I'd go to YouTube and look it up, there would be like nothing there. And so I was like, well, I guess this means that I should make a video about it. And I did on my lunch break. And I was like, okay, if one person sees this and they benefit from it, that would be fantastic. And now here we are a few years later, and it has almost 70,000 views. So, hey-o. It's
congratulations on that.
Thank you. Like, I'm sure you guys have this experience too, where it just having that space where you're sharing your knowledge, welcoming people into this space to talk about this technology. It just opens up so many doors and opportunities. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, when we started this back in the day, I think about, if we had a couple listeners, and then you start thinking about it, if there was a room and you had 70,000 people in that room who are listening to this, it would be amazing. So you don't kind of think about it when you hit numbers of listeners of how many people are there. But I have a little bit of a question for you. You say battery scientist. Have you always been interested in batteries? And where did this come from? Did you just wake up, you had a little alkaline battery and said, I think I'd like to study this for the rest of my life? Or was it more than that?
Yeah, I had this dream once where I woke up and I was like, it must be batteries. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't. It didn't come to me in the night. So I was honestly stressed as an undergrad
student. It does now, though, probably.
It does now. Oh, that it does. I've had dreams where I'm like inside of a scanning electron microscope, like going over a material in the nanoscale. Anyway. That's just my mind as a materials characterization
sorry to interrupt.
Scientist. Totally fine. So yes, battery scientist. I didn't realize there was such a thing as a battery scientist. And I tried doing a lot of different research projects as a physics student for undergrad. And I found myself getting really interested in energy materials. So I did an internship at NASA Jet Propulsion Lab in their electrochemical technologies group. And I was doing research on fuel cell catalysts at the time. And my mentor, he had his PhD in material science and engineering, and he was a student of John Goodenough's, who he won the Nobel Prize for the invention of the lithium ion battery. And it wasn't until we were talking and he told me about battery science and how it's also electrochemistry like fuel cells. And then I started reading papers, and it was like a lightning bolt, not even a light bulb, a lightning bolt moment where I was like, oh, this is it. It's batteries for me.
That is so interesting. So you say a lightning bolt moment, because I believe that was episode 1 for us. We actually talked about Ben Franklin, how we were kind of saying where potentially he may have been the person who came up with the first battery, because he actually came up with a capacitor that he had utilized to be able to hold energy, but maybe wasn't to the true first one. If we looked at the galvanic pile and different things, that if we go back to the history of the battery beginning, but it's just interesting to us to be able to think about that. So yeah, for sure. So that lightning bolt went off, and clearly after that, you just kept following that lightning bolt and kept going down the road of batteries and looking at things. So today, what does that look like for you? What does the battery world look like for you on an everyday basis?
Well, I work from home because I founded my company and we have a remote team in today's age of Zoom meetings and all of that. I love it. But I do go to a lot of conferences. I go speak. But basically my company right now, Pestana Solutions, I founded it just over a year ago, and I'm supporting high-tech companies with marketing and business development. It's really challenging right now for these technology companies to commercialize. It's such a complex picture, not let alone the technology development. So I love working with brilliant teams who have really innovative technology and helping basically get just word out there that it exists. It's so difficult sometimes to communicate complex technology, and that's really where I've found my specialty in. And I also am developing educational resources on Nanoverse battery courses. If you go to batteriescourses.com, working on the first course, which will be out in 2026.
Okay, that's super cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you a little about what, in terms of, we talked about a lot of people coming and looking at views, and obviously you can look at all the metrics, podcasts, you look at all the metrics on YouTube. What's some of the most popular content that you produce that has resonated with people? If you could share that with us.
I mean, my first electrochemical impedance spectroscopy video got so many views, and I've heard it's wild to me, from CEOs of major companies to high school students. I've heard from so many people who've watched that. I also have videos about Nyquist plots and Bode plots. So very nerdy technical content. But I do like to get on TikTok and talk about batteries. I have a video that reached 1 million views that started with, if you charge your battery to 100%, does it break your battery faster? And that garnered a lot of discussion in the comments.
Oh, we like that. We talk about that a fair amount. In fact, oftentimes we will finish the show with, hopefully you stay fully charged, or at least 80%. So that's usually what we like to say, because we kind of that 20 to 80% range would be the sweet spot that we talk about. But that probably is a nice segue into something else, which is batteries. And you've seen over the time that you've been working in this industry, they've changed a lot, not only in terms of the structure of what they are, in terms of the packaging, we'll say packs, but also the chemistry there. So what have you seen as the most influential things that have changed over that time? And I guess I'd pepper that with a second question is, what do you see for the future in terms of either packs, sizes, or chemistry? Because everyone's searching for that holy grail of the best energy density that they can find. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when I started the industry, that was when Tesla had just released the Model S. And so at that point, it was still up for debate whether we would see more fuel cell vehicles or more battery electric vehicles. And I was doing fuel cell research at the time, and I knew battery was going to be the thing based on what I was seeing there from a cost perspective, especially. And that's the thing, is cost. when it comes to the development of batteries and where it is today, costs are at an all-time low, especially for LFP, lithium iron phosphate batteries. And that's opened so much as far as how batteries can be used for the grids, for electric vehicles, and for other applications too. And really the driving factor of this is China's dominance of the technology and their ability to sell batteries at such a low price, just because they have the supply chain all figured out, basically. And they own it. They own so much of the world's materials and raw materials and know how to process them and produce batteries at scale. It's pretty amazing how that alone has driven the needle so much when it comes to battery development. And like earlier this year was in Korea at Interbattery 2025, biggest battery conference in Korea, 80,000 people. Our biggest battery conference in North America is only, I think it was like 20,000 people. So if you can imagine, it's like 4 times as big. And that's Korea. In China, you get conferences that are hundreds of thousands of people. So, the United States is pretty far behind. And a lot of the developments that we're seeing are coming from Eastern Asia. And we are seeing some really cool chemistries coming out in the States, but there's a lot more innovations besides the chemistries that I'm paying attention to that will really move the needle for the battery industry here.
Oh, like what? What are those other elements? Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to just being able to build batteries at scale is a big thing. Manufacturing, reducing scrap rate. These are process engineering, manufacturing challenges. We need trained workforce, technicians, operators who can use the equipment. And then you have the infrastructure itself in the US, charging station availability, and just public sentiment and awareness of what this technology is and what it's like to live in a world with this technology, right? There's a lot of anxieties about range, about charging that are coming up for the general public. So it's this balance that I see between the building up the industrialization of the battery industry and supply chain in the US with the public education and workforce development.
No, I think the education part is big, right? That's the biggest one for me.
Yeah, and hopefully, podcasts like ours, your show starts to help people understand it's that range anxiety that is somewhat misplaced, I think, for folks. And I think a lot of people think batteries, they think of EVs, but also they don't realize how much of today's grid, we could talk about Texas and how much they have in terms of power and supply. We're talking about Pacific Northwest and actually now how they're growing their ability for grid-tied batteries. You don't realize you're probably using it in some way, shape, or form in your home, even if you don't have a Tesla Powerwall or you don't have a Sanctuary or you don't have something there. But the availability of actually having that in your own home is getting more and more, I would call it ubiquitous, honestly, is because you could pick so many different brands that you want to do, whether you decide I want to just go buy an EcoFlow Ultra, right? And put it like self-serve myself and have a 30 amp outlet that I put in, we're done, right? In order to be able to do that, essentially plug and play with very little knowledge that's going on. So I think it's getting more, but you're right. China, really Japan, you're seeing vehicles that they're coming out with that are very low cost, very high quality performance with immense density in terms of their ability to not only recharge the battery very quickly, but also have enough range that would match today's ICE vehicle very easily in terms of 15 minutes and I'm at 300 miles charged up. But it's the infrastructure in the US that isn't there, because the number of level 2 chargers isn't there versus the number of chargers that are out there that can provide more than that. Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah. So what do you think? I guess this leads to opportunity, but challenge. I say, what do you think the biggest challenge in the US is right now if you had to pick that one thing?
Oh my goodness, that is such a big question.
We have time.
Oh man, I'm on the spot. I think there's multiple angles to look at this, right? You have the battery cell chemistry development and like, how are you going to find the next breakthrough technology, right? There's not one cell to rule them all, for sure. There's cells for different applications. And there's this major gap on the technology development ladder, so to say, or you can think of stepping stones where you get from the lab scale where you're just, okay, I made a cell in my little laboratory, but this is not a cell that's going to go into a product, right? It needs so much more testing and development to get there. And there's different steps that you go through from that research scale to the mass production scale. And a lot of those steps are missing here in the United States today. Now, there are a bunch of what are called pilot lines being built right now. So lines that can manufacture cells on a level that's not quite your gigafactory level, but somewhere in between. And you need that critical step to help innovate forward and get to production and learn all the hard lessons of how do you actually manufacture a cell, right, before you get there. And that, to me, overcoming that, it takes a lot more than just, oh, we'll build some pilot lines, right? You need funding. Funding. You need dollars. You need government, private, all the monies, right? And you need people who know how to do these things and solve these challenges. And so we are seeing some great things happening. There's some funding becoming available, a lot less than the IRA days, of course, but hopefully there's more in the future. And then we are seeing a lot of like work exchange programs where people from Asia, from Europe will come to the US and teach people how to build batteries and everything like that. But so much more needs to be done there to help bridge that gap.
Yeah, interesting.
That is interesting. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's the education on multiple levels, right? For people to understand that the general public, to understand the need and why we need to continue to grow this. It's the I want to say, boy, not the VC industry, the angel industry, but I think it's interesting how the advent of AI has actually kind of pulled away a little bit of that interest out of the battery industry, right? Yet, the same token, the reliance on the battery industry is going to continue to become more and more, given the fact of, you can even ask, Jeff and I have joked, I asked AI how much energy it's using currently, and how much to extrapolate how much you'll use in the future. The reality is we're not going to be able to produce enough with the current constraints of what it is to support the future demand that will be on AI. So like, you're going to have to make a battery that if the grid goes down for an extended period of time, how are you going to support that data center effectively so that all the dependence that we have can continue to be supported, so to speak, that's there. So it's an interesting dilemma.
Absolutely. And that's a huge thing, is data centers need batteries. Like, you need batteries in data centers, and not just like one type of battery. You need a variety of types that can provide like really quick, high power, maybe even use a supercapacitor for that, maybe use a zinc battery for that. And that opens up even more possibilities. And that's really exciting for the battery industry right now, is these data centers are finding these energy problems and running into these energy problems. And, we don't want to be burning more fossil fuels to power data centers. We want to be tapping into a collection of energy sources that are available in different regions and capitalizing on the low cost of different options, depending on where you are. It's a very like localized picture when it comes to using energy. And that's another thing I really love about batteries, is it has global implications, but you can get super hyper local with how you focus on solving problems. Anyway, but yes, data centers, AI, they need batteries.
Well, I think wasn't it, Mike, when we talked to Sean Murphy, he was talking about in the recycling area, like keeping it as local as possible, right? Like the fact that like it blows your mind that like, oh, we're going to take all of this scrap material and we're going to put it on a ship and we're going to sail it across the ocean to be recycled. It's like,
the U.S.
we should be able to do that.
The U.S. is the largest exporter of critical minerals. And here we are having a problem.
Here's a fun fact for you.
With critical mineral availability.
Right.
Because we don't recycle them here.
Well, and that's part of the problem, right? Is we have, as we said, there's a couple different ways to get this. And I mean, today, right now, I think it's lithium, right? I mean, if we're going to say it's like lithium batteries are probably the most predominant, unless I'm missing the ball here that's there, is that, and if we've used them up, which I would always argue they're not fully used up, but we have them here, being able to recycle those materials effectively, and it's building an infrastructure where we can effectively recycle those materials and be able to put them back into the supply chain, and then be able to put them that back into another cell, another pack, and be able to make them and move forward, which is extremely important for us to be able to sustain not only in this country, but I would argue sustain in the world. And I think people have to look at that aspect, is we can't just keep pulling these things out of the earth, so to speak, and think that there's no impact there at all, because there is. So if we recycle it, we'll stand to a better chance at continuing to be able to use this in the future. So hopefully.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's a big misconception that people think that electric vehicle batteries are going to end up in landfills. It's like, no, they are too valuable of materials to end up there. Like, I know people who store them in warehouses waiting for the price of recycling or second use to be justifiable, right? Economic. That's the thing, is the economics don't quite work. You need to have a big volume of batteries to recycle. And we're just not quite there yet. And also with the low cost of batteries right now, it's like, why recycle it when you can just buy a fresh battery, buy a battery that's non-recycled for even cheaper. So I think over time, this is going to change. This is going to flow. We're thinking of, this is getting into the world of commodity trading and energy trading. And that's a very interesting world, I must say.
Oh, yeah, definitely. In fact, the funny thing, you mentioned that, but that's kind of how we met Sean. We had a gentleman by the name of Matt LaMontagne on, and Matt works on a bunch of EVs, so he's an EV mechanic. And he was swapping out, I believe it was Nissan Leaf batteries and putting new packs in Nissan Leafs to kind of bring them back to life. And there was this person that was buying the old ones and from him and utilizing them to test them. And he's like, hey, you should talk to this person. And that person was Sean. So it was sometimes our show gets like rolling on talking to this next person and looking at what's going on. And obviously for him, utilizing the technology to be able to look at the battery and tell you about it without, taking the battery fully apart was important, and how the genesis of Titan and how it's continually, iterated, so to speak, over time is pretty interesting for us to follow them after we've seen them so many years ago. So yeah, and battery quality is such a big challenge. That's their Titan AES system, I think it is, that does the ultrasonic inspection. So super cool technology, and appears inside of the cell. And that's the thing, is when it comes to producing a battery, you can't just think of the defects that happen on the manufacturing line. If something's off in the battery and maybe you don't detect it, it could be like a latent defect and have an issue in operation years later. So they're pretty finicky. So it's great to have different types of those inspection equipment. I'm glad you brought that. That's another big challenge if you're trying to produce quality batteries.
Yeah, we actually got a tour of their facility, and one of the most interesting things that they told us was when they were looking at these Leaf modules with their ultrasound scanner, like some of them were different. Like, what's like these are different. Like they just looked different than the others. Like one of these things is not like the other. It was because those packs in the car were vertical instead of horizontal.
Oh wow!
Like so, there was like this weird gravity element to what the batteries cycling over time. It was just crazy stuff. So super fun.
Well, that's a good segue to another question we have, and we kind of peppered this a little bit in pre-show. So I'm going to go with this. Clearly, batteries and their changes, and energy density that's there, and not only the chemicals that are being used, are going to continually change over time, right, and have some impacts. But not only on this planet, but in potential future interplanetary travel, if we kind of think of that, because we're clearly going to be utilizing that effectively, and who knows how long that's going to be. So I guess if you were to take your magic wand, or you were to kind of take your lens and peer into the future, what do you think are the things that will influence the battery industry the most in order to move it forward? And whether that's energy density or different packs or different designs. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, since you're deep into this?
I mean, when thinking about space applications in particular, I interviewed at the Aerospace Corporation years ago, and I asked them, do you guys do anything with lithium ion batteries? And I got laughed at because they were like, oh, we can't use lithium ion. It needs to go through so many tests to be validated for space use and reliability and blah, 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 blah. Right? They're using like nickel metal hydride. Fast forward now, all the companies putting satellites in space are using lithium ion. And I'm like, who's to say? So it just goes to show the way that the space industry has used batteries and thought about using batteries has shifted a lot because they've needed to accelerate the pathway to get new technologies into space to be used, right? So that opens a lot of doors to the different types of chemistries out there. Now, I think of, when you're in space, you have, radiation, you have high temperatures and low temperatures. Like, you're really just raw out there in the universe experiencing all sorts of potential things in a vacuum. And while that can be very tame, you have the launch to go through where that's a huge vibration, up into the atmosphere and beyond. And then, so it's very interesting. I was on a team doing a little bit of testing and validation for batteries that were going to go into space. And it's very interesting tests you use that are much different than you would use for like an electric vehicle or a consumer electronics device. But yeah, the temperature differences, it really depends on what is it doing in space. Is it just going to be floating on a ship going to Alpha Centauri or Mars? Is it going to be based on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, or on the light side of the moon? Like, really understanding the use case of the battery will determine what chemistry and what requirements it is. Energy density is always important, but it depends on who's putting up the pennies, who's funding this mission and how much money do they have and what's their tolerance for risk. I think that determines it maybe more than some of the requirements of the cell. Anyway, you could see I could talk for a long time about these things.
We're going to pause our conversation with Jill Pestana right there for this week. We'll continue learning from her when episode 248 drops on January 13th. We hope you'll join us for that first episode of 2026 and the beginning of year number 7 of I Like Batteries. Happy New Year.